guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be recreating this Jacquemus top that is from their fall winter 2020 fashion show. I actually just stumbled upon the image of this top on Pinterest and I was super inspired, and I got really lucky because I had this fabric that I had bought a long time ago just like laying around, and it actually happened to be very similar to the original. So when I originally recreated this top, I posted a little video on TikTok. I really had no plans of making a tutorial or anything, but a lot of you guys liked it and the tutorial was highly requested, and so that is why I decided to make it again and just show you guys the process. When I decided to recreate this top for the purpose of this video, I actually couldn't find the exact same fabric, so I ended up picking up a white satin fabric. You can actually use just any fabric that you want. It'll pretty much work with any type. Just a little disclaimer, I am not a fashion designer and I did not go to fashion school. I actually only started sewing a few months ago, and so a lot of the techniques that I use in this video are self-taught. And so if you guys have a better way of sewing, please feel free to do whatever you think works. Like I said, I'm not saying everything that I do in this video is 100% correct. This is just me showing you exactly how I managed to recreate this top. Okay, so for the materials, you guys are going to need a pair of fabric scissors, a notebook or pattern paper, a tape measure, some thread, the same color as your fabric, some tweezers, a pencil to mark, a few pins, some clothespins, a ruler, and an iron. I got mine off Amazon for like 30 bucks. And then obviously you guys are going to need a functioning sewing machine. I have the Singer Heavy Duty. Any sewing machine will work for this project since we're just going to be using a straight stitch. You're also going to need some fabric. I picked up a yard of satin fabric, but any fabric that you choose to use will work just fine. Just make sure it's not stretchy. First thing that I did was I took a bathing suit top that fits me really well, and I used it as a reference to draw the triangle top. I just traced it very roughly, and then I went over with the ruler and I kind of played around with the shape a little bit. I wanted the triangle to be a little bit elongated on one side, and so that's the way that I drew it. After that, I measured about a 1/2 inch around the perimeter of the triangle for the seam. And for the bottom part of the triangle, I wanted it to be a little bit curved, so I just bent my ruler and drew it in that way. Feel free to play around with the shape. I changed it a few times just until I was satisfied with the shape that I wanted. Once you're satisfied with the shape, you can cut it out, and here I am comparing it to the original pattern that I used for my top. One way that you can figure out if the pattern that you drew is large enough to cover your boobs, you can cut out the seam allowance that we drew previously and just put it against your chest and make sure that it covers the areas that you want to be covered. After that, you can just tape back the seam allowance. The next thing that I did was I ironed my fabric. It makes it easier to cut, and obviously you don't want wrinkly fabric. If you're using satin fabric like I am, make sure you iron the side that's not shiny, because ironing the other side will just ruin it. After that, I took my pattern and I pinned it down and I just cut out the shape of the pattern. After that, I separated the pattern from the fabric and I used that piece of fabric to trace out 3 more of the same pieces. If you're using one-sided fabric, make sure that you cut the pieces so that they face each other. Here I accidentally cut them all facing the same direction, so I had to cut an extra piece. After that, I took 2 pieces and I pinned down the sides and left the bottom side open, and make sure the non-shiny side is facing up. So as you can see here, I sewed the two side parts, but I left a little gap at the very top, and that is where the strap is going to go through. And once you flip them over, you should end up with two pretty triangles. After that, I laid out my fabric on the side where I cut the triangles, and I used that bottom half to create the base for the top. So here I used my tape measure to measure around my chest. I measured about 28 to 30, but I added about an inch for the seam allowance. And then here I just cut out the scraps that I couldn't use. So then I cut this large rectangle measuring about 32 inches by 12 centimeters for the base of the top, and then I folded it in half and I pinned down the edges. So after sewing the edges together, I flipped it right side out, and you end up with this rectangle strap looking thing that is going to be attached to your two triangles. After that, I wanted to make the strap very flat, and so I ironed it, but I had to cover it with a piece of fabric so that the silk part wouldn't get ruined. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I did the exact same thing with the two triangles. Ironing these pieces will just make the pinning and sewing much easier later on, so that is why I did that. After that, I cut out two 20-inch by 1-inch pieces of fabric for the straps. So to make the straps, I folded each edge of the fabric into the middle and then folded that in half and pinned it down. So to attach the straps, I basically just slid the strap through the top little gap that I left in the triangle top earlier and sewed it down. And then I just did the exact same thing with the other triangle. Okay, so after that, I pinned the two triangles to the base of the top. I recommend that you try it on so that you can adjust and make sure that the triangles are where they need to be. When you put it through the machine, I recommend that you sew it facing up just so that you can make sure that the stitch is super straight and that the triangles are intact. Okay, so now to the fun part. I basically just used the remainder of the fabric and I folded it in half and then cut it down the middle. After that, I took both of those pieces and folded them in half, and then I pinned the fabric in the shape of a funnel. So closer to the top of the fabric, the pins were more far apart. And as I was approaching the bottom, I was moving the pins closer and closer together until there was about an inch of space in between the pins. Sorry, this is so hard to explain. I literally can't think of another way to explain this to you guys, but just watch and try to replicate what I'm doing. As you can see here, since we're getting close to the bottom, I started placing the pins more towards the middle, and that is exactly what you want to do. At the very bottom, I left about an inch of space. It should be big enough to fit a clothespin through there. And then you're gonna have to do the exact same thing to the other side. Don't be afraid to like play around with it and make sure that it's even. And yeah. So here we're gonna gather the fabric as we run it through the machine. I folded about a half inch of fabric. I did that all the way till the bottom, and that's what gave me the really pretty ruffle detail. And then make sure you follow the outline that you set for yourself with the pins. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good to just keep the pins as a guideline for your gathering. And if you do it correctly, you should end up with this really pretty piece of gathered fabric, with the seam wider at the top and narrow at the bottom. After that, you're going to want to cut the excess fabric with your fabric scissors all the way up to the top. Okay, so this part is the trickiest out of the whole project. You're gonna wanna attach a clothespin to the very bottom opening that we left and secure the pin. Then you're gonna wanna slide it through the whole piece of fabric and then pull it out from the top. When the pin is about halfway through the fabric, you can insert your hand through the other side and try to pull the pin through. Okay, so what you should have now is two sleeves and a triangle top, and what we're gonna do now is arrange the sleeves on the top to how we want it, and we're gonna pin them down. After that, I just sewed on the sleeves with the needle and thread by hand. I did kind of a blind stitch since I didn't want the thread to show from the front. From the back side, it looks a little messy just because I wanted to make sure that the sleeve wouldn't fall. So you want to make sure that it's very secure on the top, but also that the thread doesn't show from the front. So here I actually asked my boyfriend if he could pin down like where I wanted the straps. You might want to try this on for this part just so that you can make sure that the straps are your size, and when you do that you can go ahead and sew them down to the back. Okay, so in order to secure the back, I made 4 more straps. If you have a zipper the correct size, you can use that. But since I didn't have a zipper and I didn't know how else to secure it, I decided to just make straps for it and tie the back together. And so I just followed the same process as I did earlier. So on the back, on the edges, I folded down about 2 inches and I sewed that down, and that is where the straps are gonna go. And then you just do the exact same thing to the other side. So when you finish attaching the straps, it should look something like this. And now we're gonna attach the sleeve to the back. So when you sew the sleeve down, you want to make sure that it's kind of like tucked inside of your arm, kind of like right under your armpit, so that the stitch is hidden. So if you do this correctly, you should end up with a stitch like this. It is on the outside and it's not the prettiest stitch ever, but no one is really going to see it because it's going to be tucked inside of your arm. So the next morning I just did a little finishing touches and I clipped away all of the threads that were hanging. Okay, so this is the final result for the top with the satin fabric. Obviously it looks a little different because I mean it's custom made and all of them are going to come out different. Like yours is going to come out way different than mine, but I'd say it's pretty on point and it's very similar to the one that I originally created. So yeah, if you guys follow the steps exactly how you watched in this video, you should end up with something very similar to this. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.